Hello friends, welcome back to some fun Tinercad tutorials with me. My name is Dr. Erica with Rosie Research, and for our patrons you can always find us at patreon.com/Rosie Research, and in that we will ship you guys some of the 2D things that we make in the mail, which is fun. So today we have been working on a geology and gemology unit, and we are going to make code blocks into a fun little gem. So you're going to sign into your Tinercad, which I already have open, and then on the left hand side you have these code blocks, and you'll click on that and you can create a new code block, and that will get you all set up with the things that you need. And you just say new design when this comes up. And now you'll notice we have all of these different shapes that we can play with. We can modify these shapes in different ways. We can control it in different ways. We can do math. We can even add comments. And this is Blocky Programming, so it's going to be drag and drop programming. And the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to make a gem that is a rectangle with trapezoidal sides so it can fold into a three-dimensional figure. So I'm going to start by creating a new object, and you can give your object a name. I like to give them fairly obvious names like trapezoid for my trapezoid here. And we're going to make our box, and you can add a box. You want to make it so it clicks right here, and we can change these things. So I'm going to keep the width at 20. I'm going to make it into a rectangle, so the length will be 10 and the height, I like to keep it around 3 for these things. And if you hit play over in this upper right corner, you will notice that it builds that item in your work plane, which is pretty fabulous. So now I need to make the triangular sides of my trapezoid. So I can take a wedge here and I can click that, and if I hit play now, I'll get the two items they sort of built on top. But you'll notice that this triangular wedge is not quite what I want it to be. That's not going to be a very useful trapezoid. So what we're going to do is we're going to rotate that. So I can come over here and I can click my rotate, and we'll rotate it around the X by 90 degrees, and we'll also rotate it around the Y by 90 degrees. So let's see what it looks like when I do this. So now I have this sort of ready to go. Let's figure out our internet. There we go. Maybe we'll switch real fast to a different internet. All right, now we are going to, this wedge is a little thick, so I need to change the size of the wedge. Now, unlike in my box here, I don't have the ability to change the width and the length and the height of my wedge, but I can do that by scaling it. So over here in purple I can pick out a scale, and you can scale in X or Y or Z. So I really want it to be much thinner, so I can scale it in Z. You can do some math, and to get to 3 it'll be 0.15. And so now this is looking pretty good. I am realizing actually I think I want this to be a square for the trapezoid, for the trapezoid, and a rectangle when I'm actually making my gem. So this looks great, except for I need to move this trapezoid to the side. So I can do that. I can bring out a move over here, and I can move it to, let's say, -20. And we can see what it looks like. So this is looking great. And now I want to build another triangle for the other side of this. So again, I will add a trapezoid, or a wedge, sorry. And I'm going to rotate it just like I rotated before. So I'm going to rotate around the x-axis by 90 degrees. I'm going to rotate around the y-axis by 90 degrees. And we can run it and we can see what happens. That's looking good. Now this one needs an additional rotation, because if I move this up, it's still going to be a little wonky, right? It needs to rotate one more time, and now we can rotate around Z, and we can look at how much do we need to rotate that. We can try for 90, and we can see what it's going to look like. So this is looking great. I need to move it, and I also need to shrink it down to the size of the other items. So I'm going to scale it. It'll be the same scale. Z is going to be 0.15. And I'm also going to move it. And now instead of moving it down, I want to move it up. So I should be moving it by 20 in Y. And if you want to speed this up, you can always click here and it goes a little bit faster for you. All right, so this is looking great. I am really liking this. We can now create a group of these items. Right down here in the purple, in the modify, we can create a group. I'll just make it gray, and you'll notice that then it's all gray, all one piece. All right, and I'm going to scale it down a little bit, only because I know where I'm going, and I know that I'm going to want this to be a little bit smaller in the end. So we can scale it, and we can rotate it also, just to get it so it's all set up for where we want it to go. We're going to rotate around the Z-axis by 180 degrees. And we can run this, and we get a little guy that looks like this. This is looking fantastic. The thing I'm thinking about now is I want this to fold up. It's going to print in 2 dimensions, but I want it to fold up. So I actually need to bevel these edges here. So we need to add some bevels, which is like adding a hole. And I'm going to use the roof. And instead of it being green, I can click on it gray right here. And if I hit go, you'll see it come up. You can see it as a sort of gray shaded area. If I were to group these two, it would actually be like a negative. It subtracts it. And I can show you what that would look like. So if I create a group here, now you can see that it subtracted certain parts of it. And I don't want to do that quite yet. One important thing when we're using Tinercad Codeblocks, always make sure you drag it into that trash bin. And you can rerun it. And so now I'm going to scale this roof because I'm going to need to rotate it and I need to scale it so that it's proper. I'm going to put Y is 2 just to try to make it a little bit taller. And I want to rotate it so that this point is actually facing down, so it'll sort of cut into it. So I'm going to rotate, and I can rotate around the X-axis by 180 degrees, and the Z-axis, see what that does. So the X-axis, that flipped it over, and now I want it to go along this line. These 2 lines right here, I'm going to have to do some up and down, and some along those trapezoidal lines. So if I want it to go along the trapezoidal line, now I need to rotate around Z, and that should be about 45 degrees. Let's see if that can line up. Yep, that looks like it. I'll still have to move it though. So now I can come over and I can move that piece. And let's just try Y is -10 and see where that puts us. That looks like it's right on it. And you'll notice though it's like a little bit too far down. So I could bring it up, I could move it up to Z is 4, let's say. And now it's sort of coming right down there, which is really good because that'll cut it off and then I can have that beautiful bevel. All right, so I'm going to do this again. I'm going to add a roof right here. And I'm going to, I can actually copy paste. In fact, I'll show you guys what you can do. We'll put this in the trash. I can take this whole item, I can copy it, and click it back in and I can paste it. And that's one way to get around some of this. And here, instead of rotating by 45 degrees, I'm going to rotate by -45 degrees because when I look over here, this angle and that angle are both 45 degrees, but they are in opposite directions. So I'm going to want to take that into account. All right, and I can run it and see where that goes. And so now I need to move this guy up. And instead of going Y is -10, I can go to Y is 10 for that. I can move it up, and that is looking pretty lovely. I'm going to wait to do the vertical pieces until it gets all the way into my final puzzle piece. That will let me see it a little better. So let's group this, and we will take a look at what we see at the end. Notice that now I have these lovely bevels. Now the thing that's great about this is now I can remake this trapezoid anytime I want to in the program. I don't have to write all of this code. I can just make a copy of it and edit it accordingly. So I really like that. So now we're actually going to drag out a new object, and this one's going to be called our gem. So I'm going to call this the gem. And this is the one that's going to actually be what we want. In the end, we'll delete this gray one. And so let's see, we're going to add, to start with the gem, let's start with our rectangle. So I'll take my box and I can fill in, my normal thing. So I'll keep the width at 20, I'll make my length 30, I'm going to make my height 3. And that's just so it's a really nice height that ships in the mail. And so we can see what this looks like now. I've got my trapezoid and then I've got this middle center gem piece. And when I'm doing this program, I actually really want to center on my XYZ coordinates. I want this corner to be at the 0, 0, 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to move it. And that just makes math a little bit easier later. So I'm going to move it. And I'm going to move it by X is 10, because that's half of the width. By Y is 15, which is half of the length, and by Z is 1.5, which is half of the height. And you'll notice that it will then move it into that corner piece for us, which is really handy. We know where everything is at now. All right, so we're going to add trapezoids to these side pieces. Now here, when we added things, we added it all, we kind of brute forced it. We made one triangle and then another triangle and then one hole and then another hole. This time, we are going to use a loop and iterate. All right, so we are going to, in our loop, we're going to add a copy of our trapezoid, and I'm thinking I'm going to work on these side trapezoids. So we got top and bottom trapezoids and side to side trapezoids we have to add for this gem. And I need to move it, the copy of that, it's going to copy right where this gray one is at right now. So I'm going to need to move it to the right spot. So we'll move it to X is -5, and then that's all we need to do there. We don't need 10 of these, right? We're just going to need 2. And I like to go from 0 to 1, because then if I do any math, the first one I can place properly, and then the next ones I can sort of iterate accordingly. So we can see what this will look like real fast. And that, it moved it a little funny. I was not expecting that. Let's see. Oh, because I did not say what I'm adding a copy of. So let's come down here. And let's move, let's add a copy of the trapezoid. There we go. All right, so now I have some trapezoids that came up. I want them to be whole trapezoids. So not, I want them to be physically whole, not actually negative space like it is right now. So I'm going to add a trapezoid, and you'll notice they stack on top of each other right now. So when I build this, I just get 2 right on top of each other. And that's kind of okay for the moment, but I really need them to, one to go on this side and one to go on that side. And the way that I can do that is I will move it again. And when I move it, I'm going to move, I know I want to move the Y up to 15, and I know I want to move the Z up to 1.5 so that they sort of match. But this X is going to be different, because I want to put 1 here and then 1 over this way. Now I can use a math variable to do that. And you'll notice this says count with I from 0 to 1. So I can put I over here. It's down in my data now. And drag and drop that. And I'm going to do I times whatever initial spot I want it to be at, which is going to be, I think, 30. And I can drag this whole item into this X. Like that. And what's going to happen is the first time I'm going to have 0 times 30, so it won't move it at all, and the next time I'll have 1 times 30. So it's changing how much I move in the X with each iteration. And if I run this, you can see that I have this situation. This is great, but I need to rotate this one. So I can also add a rotate, and I can rotate it about the Z axis. Now I don't want to rotate the first one, so I need to add in more math. And so I'll do Again, I'll add in my math piece. It's going to have the I each time it counts. And I'm going to multiply it. And I want to rotate it by 180 degrees. I want to flip it over for the second one. And of course, the first one, it'll be 0 times 180. So that won't change that first one. And now I have sort of the beginning makings of this gem. And I was able to do that by this guy. And I'm going to actually copy and paste this to make the gems on the top and the bottom. Of course, I don't want to count with I anymore, so I need a new variable. We can just call it J. And I'm going to count from 0 to 1. I want to add a copy of the trapezoid. I'm just going to change the color so that we know when we look over here and we build it, we know what the differences are. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to rotate around the z-axis by 90 degrees. And so let's see what happens when we do that. And I can get this sort of top and bottom. So you can see how I have this purple, one will go on the top and one will go on the bottom. So that will work out for us really well. I'm going to have to scale these. So I'm going to scale this. And I've done the math. This needs to scale to 0.68 in x. And then for my initial coordinates, they're going to be a little different. I'm going to move it from to x is 10 and y is -5. And let's see, the z is still 1.5. That's all right there. So these are looking a little bit better. Of course, they're not placing in the right spot, right? And here I don't want it to jump over, I want it to actually jump up. So here I'm going to want to change what this guy looks like. So I'm going to change this into the Y. And I'm going to put the 1.5 up here. And this will just be my sort of specialty spot. So I'm going to go from J. Now we can look at it as it moves in Y. And it's almost there. I just didn't move it by enough. So we could try a new number. We could try 40, let's say. And we can run it. And that is looking fantastic. That's just what we want. And we were able to use a couple of these loops to do that, which is really nice. All right, so now we need to start making the bevels that are going to go around this rectangle and around these pieces here. And we want bevels on everything so that I can sort of bend it over and get it all ready. So let's see. We can probably do another iterative loop. Oops, these are both from J. Interesting. But it seems to build it fine. I'm a little surprised by that. All right. So here we're going to loop. We're going to go from 0 to 1. We're going to loop by 1, and then we're going to add in our roof, the same type of system that we did before to make a hole. So we're going to add this roof piece in here to make a hole. And you can sometimes change these slightly, but not much. We're going to let that one be. We're going to rotate our roof just like we did before. So we're going to rotate around the x-axis by 180 degrees. And we can see where that puts us. So we have this beautiful roof right here. And it's going to be what we use to make those bevels. I'm going to move it. And I'm going to make it so that it moves and does multiple things so that I can iterate through this. And let's see, I'm going to move it by, we're going to do some more math here. We'll do, there's our I. There's our I. We're going to multiply again, and we'll do times 20, and that will go into our X. And our Y should be, I think, at 15. And our Z, we'll put it at 6. We don't want it all the way down or all the way up because we want just a little bit of it to come through. Oh, this is looking really good. You can see how it sort of lines up on this, but it's not long enough. And what we can do is we can scale this. And so I could scale it, let's say, by Y is 2, and that should make it a little bit longer. So now I have these longer pieces and they will cut the bevels for me, which is great. All right. Now, let's see. We are going to do, I think our vertical ones would make sense. All right, so let's actually add some bevels for the top and the bottom of this red rectangle. So I'm going to copy this, hook it back in, and we will count with a new variable. Let's call it M. I still want this one to count by, oh, interesting. I didn't know it realized it did that when I copied it. Let's toss this guy away then. We'll just bring out a new one of these. All right, we'll count with I here. And this is all going to be slightly different because I'm going to have to rotate it around the x-axis. So first we want to rotate this around the x-axis by 180 degrees, which I already had there. Silly me. And we're also going to rotate it around the z-axis. And that one we're going to rotate around by 90 degrees. So let's just see where that puts us with our bevels. Oh, we gotta fix this. We want to go from 0 to 1. We've got a whole bunch of them. And you do see that they are now going this direction. So that's what we want. We are going to scale it differently. Oh, well, we're going to scale it that same way. We're going to move it. Let's see, let's move it. We'll just keep this all 0s to 6s, and then we need to move it by that special amount so that we can make it go from top to bottom. So from top to bottom is in the Y direction. I'm going to make this change in the Y direction, and I want to use I. So I'm going to pull over my variable I. I'm going to multiply it like I have been, and then that makes this second one just how much it needs to move over for the second piece. Let's see how this works for us. Alright, so it moved it top to bottom, great. I'm noticing my scale though, I kind of want to scale it in x by 2, I think, and y by 1. Let's take a look at that, and I think it should make it longer. Yes, beautiful. There we go. So that's looking good. Now I need to add the top part of my gem. So these blue and purple things are going to sort of fold up and in, and I'll have sort of an emerald cut looking gem. So I need to add in that piece. So let's make the top gem face. And then we'll pick our shape. We'll pick a box that we can do. We're going to attach that to the bottom. And let's make its width 7 and its length 10. And like all the others, its height will be 3. And now we're going to want to move it into place. So we'll grab our move out, and we can you can do this either by guesswork, or you can do it with using some math. So let's see where this guy shows up now. It should show up on the right-hand side. There we go. So that's going to be the top part of it. And of course I'm going to need some pieces in that gem to have the bevels as well. This is looking pretty great. I'm really happy with the way it is working so far. So now I want to add the bevels to this piece over here that I just did. I'm going to put it in a new color. We'll put it in a bright blue, so that then when we talk about it, we don't get mixed up with the red rectangle. We'll be doing the bright blue rectangle. Alright, so I'm going to pull out a new iteration to start making the bevels that'll be on this blue one. And just like all these other pieces, I'm going to pull this out and copy it so we can use it again. We'll put this down here. So this should rotate it for us just fine. And we're not going to want it to go as high. So we could change this in the, let's see, the Y direction. Let's move it. Let's just give it a guess. Let's move it to like Y is 50, or X is 50, maybe Y is 10. Let's see how that does for us here. Oh, we accidentally did this again where we did from 1 to 10. I always forget that, so we'll go 0 to 1. And that moved it quite a bit. So we need to move that down by a lot. Let's see. Yes, so that's because our Y is moving here. Let's change this to, let's look at our variable. Here we're counting with K, so let's go pull K in. And, oops, we lost our math piece. Let's pull that out from back here. Put K in there. Probably only want to change it by about 10. Let's see where this puts us. A lot of using these code blocks is adding something and then trying it and adding something else. Ooh, perfect. That looks great. So now I just need to add some vertical pieces here as well. All right, so we're going to do the vertical pieces on the bright blue. So we will bring another loop over here, and a lot of this code is going to be the same. So we will add our roof. We're going to add a roof here, make it a hole, and we will rotate that around the x-axis by 180 degrees. That flips it over. We don't need to rotate it by the z-axis because we want it to be vertical. So now we need to move it, and let's move it into place for the first one. So I think this is probably, x is probably 30. And I don't think we need to worry about going up and down in the Y for either of them. So let's just give this a run and see how close we are. Oh, we forgot the X. We did it 10 times again. All right, so we'll go from 0 to 1. And let's take a look here. This is actually looking pretty exactly where I want it. We're going to move the Z up. We've been moving our Z up by 6 pretty consistently, so we're going to do the same thing for that. We're going to scale this in the Y by 2, and that will make it longer. And we also want to move it in the X. After we move it in the X by that 30, we're going to move it again for one of them. So we can write this if we wanted to. You could do that in the original one with a little bit of math, or we can do it in this one with a little bit of math. We're working with n, so we can do n times, and if I recall, that is 7 wide, so maybe times, let's do times 7. And we're going to move it in the x direction. And now we can run through it again, and we can see what it looks like. And make any modifications that we might need. And take a look around. That looks pretty good. So yeah. So now that this is all there, what we can do is we can add our create group. And we can just group this, and it will become one nice, beautiful looking gem. Whew, that looks good. Except for I don't like this gray one here, and to do that, get rid of that, we can delete an object. So we'll delete an object, and we'll delete our trapezoid, and that will make this piece go away. Just like that. Beautiful. Now I am noticing that I do want some bevels on the tops of these. And one way I could do that without having to sort of go around in a circle is I could just put a bevel on the top of my trapezoid over here. So we can do that. Let's just copy this chunk of code. We'll add a new piece. I'm going to momentarily delete my delete object so I can still see it. And we're going to keep our scale. Let's see. And we are going to This one was Z is 45. So we probably want Z to be 0. We probably don't want to rotate around Z. So let's see what happens here. Ah, yes, see, I got it right in the middle. So I need to move it over in X by a little bit, by about half. So I think that should be about -5. We'll run it one more time. And now I have this outside bevel, which is exactly what I want. That looks fantastic. And I will now delete my object. That is the trapezoid. And it will go away and we'll have this beautiful item. Now there's one thing that I noticed when I first printed this that we needed to do. And that is these bevels weren't actually wide enough for it to bend. So this blue wall sort of bent vertically straight up instead of sort of coming all the way over like I wanted it to. So what I did to remedy this was I added what I called the X factor. So in the very beginning I created a variable and I called it, instead of item, I renamed the variable the X factor. Just like that. And now I can set my X factor to whatever I want. And this is going to be really nice. I'm going to set it to 4. But it was nice when I was trying to test it because I could put in my X factor variable anywhere that I want to sort of make this wider. I can make this bevel wider. And so that comes into play in all of these places where I scale, where X equals 1, I can scale by my X factor. So this is a very handy way to change something where you change it just in one spot, and then from now on it'll change everywhere, which is really, really nice. Next time, let's see. Where's my next hole at? This one's a hole, so I can put that X factor there. And we put the X factor, that one's a hole too. Let's try that. And all these places we want to change the scale of the X factor, although I'm looking at, so it might be a Y factor in some places. So let's run it again just to make sure things look nice, like what we want. Oh, not quite. So we had something come in, and I think it's coming from these guys right here. I think this Y actually wants to be the X factor, because that was the 2. Everywhere else it was X that was 2. So let's see what that looks like. You can see how much wider they are now. This is giving me a much wider bevel, but I still need a little bit of work. Alright, so I'm looking at this. We're going to actually move our create variable over to our trapezoid, because this is getting built first. I think it doesn't see it. So let's check now. Yeah, so it's much more beveled now. Now some of these are not changing where I have my X factor. So I'm going to pull this one over into Y like we had before. And let's see if that can fix it all for us. This is very close. So our bevels here on this guy are not quite what I want. And sometimes when I can't figure out how to quite get exactly what I want, let's check which one. It should be the vertical ones. Let's double check here. Let's see if that's the one we want to change. Yep, so we want to change these guys. We want those to get, let's move that over into X. And let's refresh this. Oh, we'll have to change that back to a hole next time. But we'll have a better idea of what we want. There we go. Beautiful, and now I have a, sort of a thicker bevel. The nice thing about doing this X factor is if I scroll back up here, I can change this to be whatever I want. So at 1, we kind of would have gotten our original gem that didn't have enough room to fold. You can see how much steeper these angles are. And I can change this to, let's say, 4, and I can get something that's much more foldable if I want it to fold back in on itself and not just straight up like a wall. So that is our gem. It will fold into sort of an emerald cut. It will actually end up looking kind of similar to just this 3-dimensional shape of the red box, It'll be kind of fun. Now, if you wanted to, you could plug a hole in the center of this we could cut a hole out to put an LED in, which would be really fun. So if you're one of our patrons and you wanted to have this 3D printed and you said, I want to be able to stick an LED through the back and maybe you can hide the CR2032 behind all of this and it would light up in a really cool way, we can do that. And I will show you how to do that right now. So we've got our object that's created. We're just going to add a hole straight in the middle. So we'll come up to shapes. We can add a cylinder and pull that over. We want it to be a hole. And this should give us an idea. We want our radius. Most LEDs are 5 millimeter. I would make this maybe sort of a 5.3 millimeter hole. So it's going to be tight, but not too tight that you can't get your LED in. And then it'll allow it so that a little bit of glue will really hold it in place. It won't be hard to put in. And all of this we don't need to worry about. Now when it comes up though, it's going to come up right around this centerpiece at the 0, 0, 0 line. So now we have to move it in our X and Y. So we can come over and move this. And we want to move it in our X and our Y. I think we had it as 20 by 30. So I want to move X by 10, which is half of 20. And Y by 30, or not 30, 15, which is half of 30. And that should move it right to where we want to go. And it also will give you an idea of how little this gem is that we made. It'd be great for a little necklace. And this goes all the way through, that's what we want. So now we can create a new group and it will cut that hole for us, which is great. Now if you have smaller LEDs, sometimes you can buy your LEDs at 3 millimeter size. You could make this 3 millimeters. There is our hole, so we can stick an LED through here, and after it's all folded up, and I'll show you guys at the end of this video a picture, after it's all folded up, you could have a little fun light up gem. All right, thank you so much for joining us. Again, if you're a patron, make sure that you email me your .stl file. To get that, you come up here over to export, and you will export .stl, and it will just save it for you. Please make sure you save it with your name and send me an email through Patreon with your address and we can get it sent out to you and you'll have a fun thing to build as well. Thank you so much for joining us and we'll see you for another Tinkercad tutorial.